Welcome, real estate rock stars, to what we call Real Estate RocknRolla. You want to be a rock and roller? Well, this is where I hope the action takes place. And I like to see a central point where you can get good advice on how to elevate your career and then move it into yet another gear. So often I'm asked, how does this whole thing work? And sometimes people look at it and say, it's all right for you, mate. It's in your head. And it's great, when we ask you questions about how you indeed got your career off the ground and then turned it into something, but how does that apply to my own? And so often I say, to so many salespeople, it's not, the whole idea is not to necessarily, use the blueprint that I've forged and just apply it directly. I mean, there's going to be lots of things that you see that you are welcome to discard, a lot of things that you're welcome to embrace. My whole aim, if I look at it the right way, is to put in perspective for real estate sales professionals a sense of being fulfilled in and around your aspirations and content with your lot. So often I say, people say, what is it about being a real estate rock star? And there's so many things that I have to say I am literally, and I mean literally, opposed to in the world of real estate sales. And that is necessarily, believing that you have to suddenly be some type of celebrity in the space with which you operate. And in fact, if I was to be perfectly honest with you, it's the one thing I've never craved. Now, some of you might be sitting there and saying, what are you talking about? Here you are on there broadcasting stuff inside the real estate space. Yeah, I enjoy that. I don't necessarily enjoy the notoriety. I've never really sought any degree of celebrity or fame or attention in that regard. And I don't see that it's a necessary thing. I mean, I remember when I first got into real estate, all you had to be was a good bloke that was able to present good logic to people. You definitely have always, and it was one thing that hasn't changed, and we'll definitely talk about this in terms of the ethos that sits inside the real estate profession. You just had to be a good bloke and have the right intent, the right intentions for people. And this transcends so many facets of the real estate profession. I talk about this when I say with marketing, so often I see, and this is even coached by some people inside the real estate space, that you create a perception and it becomes a reality. I've always taught that and still do to this day. But one of the caveat that I put on that is that there has to be the right intent that surrounds that perception. In other words, if you go out and you want to create that perception, your intention must be to make that perception a reality. Yet so often I see with real estate agents, they create a perception and they don't really fulfill that perception. So to my mind, that just becomes deception. And that's one of the things you want to stay away from. It has to be bona fide in every conceivable way. Anyway, the subject matter we have here for today is one that's I think is going to resonate with a lot of you as real estate salespeople, and that's about getting your mojo on. How do you actually get your mojo? And if we're going to talk about mojo, I think it probably falls to me to give that some sort of definition or perspective. Your mojo is some sort of magic spell, a hex, or some sort of charm that you possess. I think in our real estate space, it can be contained around one word about the it factor, or associated with that. So often they say that, when I used to hear this many, many years ago, and I was reminded of this just the other day when I was in conversation with a real estate salesperson, when they would say of a real estate agent, he's got it, or she's got it, irrespective, I used to just be fascinated by that statement. And I started to wonder, what on earth is this it factor? Because everyone that I observed inside of that real estate space that this was said of or about, they definitely had it. They had lots of clients. They had lots of sales. They were very popular with inside their sales team. And, they had, obviously with lots of sales comes lots of money, lots of continuity, and they just never really seemed to hit these low trough periods. And they were very happy inside the space. Then I started to make some other observations around this, and I noticed that people that had this it factor that were seemingly successful inside the real estate space did never got tired. In fact, even when it came to holiday periods, they didn't really want to go because they were kind of missing the action. And what I started to realize was something that was said to me many, many moons before that. As a young kid growing up, it was indoctrinated into me by my father over many, many decades. And he said lots of things. Those of you that know me well will know that I'm akin to sort of dropping his maxims whenever I possibly can around that space. But he said to me as a young kid, he said he was talking about success because I was always craving some sort of competitive spirit in it. And my father owned, a number of retail butcher shops. I used to go to work with him, and I grew up around salespeople and business people. So I always had this aspiration to do it. And I don't know why, but the benchmark was set for me by them, and I always felt like I had to surpass it. It's something that my father always tried to water down. But what he did say to me as a kid was this. He said, look, you'll succeed at whatever you do in life so long as you can answer truthfully and honestly two questions. One is, whatever it is you've decided to do, you have to be openly honest with yourself and say, am I good at this? Am I good? Do I have the goods? And he said, that's half the battle, He said, because if you're good at something, definitely you're going to make money on it. And that's a way of saying that, you've got the potential or you've got the talent. The second thing he then said to me was this. He said, but you also have to love it. You have to love it so much so that, in all honesty, you would do whatever it is that you're doing for a minimal amount of money. You would make do irrespective of how it works. And I can tell you, every other profession I had, not every other profession, there was one or two that I liked and would love to have made money at, but everything else I did, I felt like a square peg in a round hole, and it felt like work. And then I read that thing that said, find a job that you like and you'll never work a day in your life. And I can honestly say, from the first day I entered the real estate profession, notwithstanding that it was nothing like what I had supposed it would be like, it was actually better. And I have not worked a day since. Yes, the job designation has evolved and it's changed, but for me, it's always been a career lifestyle. I've never really fully understood the demarcation line that a lot of professionals like to put in place between their personal life and their work life. And they subscribe to this idea that you've got to have balance. To my mind, the only real balance you've got to have and have the pressure taken off of it is your bank balance. One of my favorite things that people say to me around, those educated people that want to stick it to you a little bit. I love saying to them, I have an MBA, and they say, really? I didn't realize. I thought you just sort of bounced from one trade into real estate, and I didn't know that you'd actually gone back to uni or the like and studied for an MBA in any tertiary field. I said, yeah, no, I've got an MBA. And they said, what's that? What is the MBA in? I said, oh, no, it's not a title or anything. Because I've just got an MBA. I've got a massive bank account. And to my mind, if you've got a massive bank account and that money part's taken away, well, then you can actually subscribe inside your business and feel very comfortable with what you're doing without feeling the pressures associated with that. So just getting back to this it factor, what is it? Well, I always said the it factor was the ability to empathize without sympathizing. That's your ability to communicate with people because you can put yourself into their shoes, understand how they're thinking and feeling, and because you're able to then communicate with them, so long as the argument that you present to them is logical, then it will get it across the line. That connection will be made. You see, and this is one of the things I really want us to share inside this space whenever we can, whenever we get together, and that is that logic sells. If you can create a logical argument as to why somebody should do something, then they're going to jump on board with it on just about every occasion. So there'll be lots of things we'll share. You know, there was one of the real estate rock stars that I spoke with the other day for about 45 minutes. I've just got to get his permission to share this with you. But I spoke with him just basically about all the fancy one-liners associated with fee and the procurement of fee. And I've got to tell you, you talk about your mojo in place. I came off of that session and I was just walking on air because I kind of shocked myself. All the years of experience that I've had and the understanding of the theory and the principles that underpin consignment selling kind of came to the fore in my discussions with him. And the one-liners that were coming out of my mouth kind of surprised me. This is the type of thing I want to see us develop inside of this space, which is being that rock and roller. You know, I think we need to live on the outside of the profession and start to think not so much about what is and accepting what is and operating inside of the space of what is. I get that we've got to do that to a certain degree, but I would rather this be about shaping it to suit ourselves. They say, and I can't remember who said it. I think it was not Roosevelt or Emerson. Anyway, whomever it was said that a reasonable man accepts the world the way that it is, but an unreasonable man changes the world to suit himself. Therefore, all progress is made through unreasonable men. So what I'd like us to do inside this space is to approach the situation from a little bit of an irrational perspective and then arrive back with a common sense answer that sort of contrasts beautifully with the way in which people approach this profession in the first place. And from this, I think we can develop or at least get our sense of mojo and put it in place. So as I said to you before, mojo is a magic spell, a hex or a charm, or broadly speaking, it's a quality that attracts people to you. And I've got to say that in the space that we operate and at the level that we operate, especially at listing presentations and all the other bits and pieces that go with it, it's your ability to attract people to you, your success, and the energy that you're providing. So to me, your mojo is your excitement, your interest, your energy, and your enthusiasm. And how do we get that mojo, sparking or coming out of us or in every perspective? All of you have heard me say that, in the business of real estate sales, you can largely compensate for a lack of experience or even a lack of knowledge by just making sure that you exude two very important factors. The first is an unshakable enthusiasm for what it is that you do, and that stoic confidence that what you're saying is right. I've said this many, many times that the real estate profession is essentially leadership. It's your ability to influence, and in leadership, you don't have to be right. You just have to be certain. So how do we actually put all of those things in place? How do we get that excitement, that interest, that energy, and that enthusiasm? I've actually heard people, and as a coach, I hear this all the time, that people want to share their shortcomings. And don't get me wrong, I'm even going to talk about things that you don't like and how you need to let go of some things and accept that they're just not you. You don't necessarily have to be involved in aspects of any profession that you just don't feel suited to or unenthused about. However, people often say to me, I'm not good at something. And they get a little bit offended when they hear my retort to that. And I say, well, that's probably because you're not interested. And they look at me like they just want to get aggressive around this. But I've got to tell you that this is what I believe to be true. You know, if you're interested in something, you make it your business to understand it. And so often, almost on a daily basis, I found myself doing this just the other day when I was stumped by something and didn't really know what move to make. And I had to just grab myself and remind myself, I said, hang on a second, you don't know what you don't know yet. What you need to do is get in there and understand the things that are puzzling you before you can then approach it with a confident attitude and take control of where it goes. So the question I would ask you all, if you're looking at this right now, is to stop accepting things as is. Stop contextually just looking at things in a broad base fashion and start to really place some impositions on yourself. I say this all the time. I say that in terms of motivation, the only person we can't lie to is ourselves. Yet so often I see that the first person we lie to is ourselves. We tend to delude. Now I don't have any problem with that if you're, you know, doing that in the sense that you want to psych yourself up each day. But you know, a self-motivated person, what does that mean? Well, self-motivation basically means that you have a reason. That you have a reason to do something, you want to be somewhere else, or you want to improve your lot in life. And if you've got that motive, then you are motivated. When people say to me that they find me motivating, I tend to believe that they are saying to me that they can't really find their own rationale or their own reasons. So therefore, they're looking for me to give them good reason to move forward. Well, if there's one thing that we need to solve before you go on, if there's one thing we need to put in place, is that you need to get your goals in order. You need to figure out what it is that's blowing your hair back so that you will never look at the business that we're in as work. I can tell you, categorically speaking, it's those individual sales professionals that have given themselves good reason that have then discarded the whole concept of our profession being anything like work. I mean, just look at it. And again, I know many of you heard me say this. I listen to real estate agents say that it's hard, the profession we're in. Really? I mean, we get up at reasonable hour. It's very civil hours. We wear nice, clean clothes to work, to the office on a daily basis. We're essentially paid to just basically persuade. And in that persuasion, we just have to talk to the right people. So long as we're talking to property buyers and property sellers, people who own property in primarily, and we're getting control around that. And all we're going to do is make sure that when we open our mouth, the right words fall out. And generally speaking, those very same people will kind of throw money at us. So, and if you look at this, I've got to tell you the difference between what I call peak performance professionalism and ordinary professionalism is usually only ever somewhere between 3 to maybe 4 more sales per month, or maybe just an increase of around somewhere between 50 and 70% of the volume that you're doing. Now, I can't tell you at what level you're going to be happy, you're going to be excited, and your mojo is going to kick in. Only you can tell yourself that. But one question I do need you to pose to yourself is this: are you in the profession to do enough, or are you in the profession to fulfill your capacity? Are you in there looking to achieve what you're capable of, not just enough to bluff your way through? You see, I reckon if you're in that space where you're just trying to bluff your way through, well, then you're not in that space that says that you not only are necessarily good at what you do, that you love what you do at the same time. Now, I've always found that when you're good at something and you're interested in it, that the love kind of comes. And so what I ask you to do is to let go of the concept of what you do for a living becoming a job. Now, I get it. I know that if you've got dependents, if you've got people around you that are relying upon you to deliver a source of income to sustain that, well, then that's a bit of an issue. And it needs to be contained inside what you're doing. But I still think that if you start to look at your capacity and fulfilling that there's just so many great things that sort of fill out from there. And again, so I've seen so many instances where salespeople have just gone at it and said, well, I'll see what happens, rather than saying, this is what will happen, and giving it a go the right way, in the right order, and setting themselves up for permanency and moving into that rock and roller. This is a wild horse that you ride. But if you can actually move your career into the space where there is no demarcation line, there's no difference between what you are doing now as a job and what you might be doing in your private or social life, that it's equally as enjoyable, because you've made the vast majority of your life fun, something you are truly interested in. Now, I've talked about this 10-step goal setter. If you get off here and you want to know more about it, please get in touch with me. The whole idea is for us over the next 13 to 15 months to elevate from this, the discussions that we have in here, the questions that you ask, the dialogue that I share with you, and all the other bits and pieces, to elevate you up so that you are at the level where you are performing, insofar as you're concerned, at your peak capacity, or very close to it, somewhere around 80%. So this 10-step goal setter is one that it takes a little bit of time. You can contain it inside of a week. It is a skill. It doesn't take long to put into place. I'm just going to go through this briefly. But basically what you've got to do is download all the clutter that you have in your head to determine what it is that really turns you on, what it is that you really want out of life, what sort of lifestyle do you really want to have. So you need to just grab a download on a wish list over a period of a week or so, all of the things you've always thought that you've subscribed to, anything you've ever said, one day I will, I'd like to have, and just get it all down. Once you've done that, you then move to step 2, and you just look at some of those things that you've written down that you might have even felt a bit giddy about when you wrote them down, and just eliminate some of the clutter. If you look at some things that are there and you think to yourself, I'm never going to do that, I won't feel unfulfilled if I never get to own this particular car or whatever it might be, and just strike it off. Then with what you're left with, you then start to look at the price, and you say, what's it going to cost in time and or money for me to achieve this? And if you're not prepared to pay that price, then you just pull that out. Then with what you're left with after that, you can see that we're continually whittling it down. You then start to look at the steps that this thing to take. Now, some of them, if something's going to take you a decade and you're not prepared to invest that decade, and you break it down into bite-sized chunks, then perhaps you might have to spread it over 2 decades, or give up on the whole thing altogether if you're not prepared to take those little steps to get to that eventual goal. Then I start to impose a deadline. I say, when does this have to be done by? When am I going to travel? When am I going to do something? You know, for me, I've got one that's on the cards. It's only been blocked by COVID, but I can tell you right now that it won't be long before I am living and working from another country and doing all the things that I do now, but living in an entirely different environment, which I wanted to do for many, many years. So the moment COVID clears, the moment I get those injections, I'm off, and I'm going to do it, because it was always in there inside the deadlines. Yes, it's been held up slightly, but I'm ready to do it. Then get the prioritization, get them in order, share the love, those people involved, show them what you've come to, see that they get on board with it, because once you get everybody involved, it's that energy that drives it forward for you to get for you to move closer to. Then just get your top 10 goals, break them down, so whittle it down. So whenever you've got a line, have a maximum of 10 and just cut it off. We'll revisit those things later and focus on the top 10. Make the commitment. So order it, book it, buy it. I can actually tell, I'm not going to tell you which country because you'll all be happy around it, but I'm almost close to buying something in this country that I want to work from, and I'm going to be doing that. Dare to visualize, get the visualization around it, and then of course, step 10, just do it. You need before you start, and some of you might even feel that your situation is rather hopeless. Some of you might say, well, I'm young and I don't really care. I'd rather just want to just go and get drunk and have fun or whatever. You still need a destination. See, the moment you have an understanding of where it is that you are going, you wake up each day and you embrace the concept of moving forward toward it. Do not, please, even though you may have heard this a bunch of times before, some of you might even be thinking it's too late to do something about it. Don't think like that. You need to revisit this stuff as a skill every really a minimum of 12 months. Yeah. But sometimes you might want to revisit it every 6 months. Some people might even want to just recalibrate it every quarter. You need to be constantly understanding the destination. You wouldn't just get up and go down to your car, kick the car over, hit the accelerator and say, I'll see how I go if you wanted to go somewhere. You always know where you want to go. And the same needs to happen inside your career. Understand the destination. Then you can start to look at what you've got to do to map it out. Then you can start to look at the skill set that you need to embrace to make this a reality. But show me somebody who knows where they're going, and I'll show you someone that loves what they do. I'll show you someone that will eventually be good at what they do because they've openly allowed themselves to become immersed or deeply interested in the subject matter. And then from there, so really with this session that we've put there, once you've got that goal in place, and again, I just invite you to directly contact me if you want some help around this. We just need to get this component worked out. And then you can start to look at the profession on a more advanced level and in a clever way that most trainers, for argument's sake, just won't allow you to get your head around. You see, when I used to hear real estate sales trainers, pardon the pun, or coaches suggest that prospecting was just a necessary evil and you had to approach it, you just had to have the attitude, and you got to move a lot of dirt to find a diamond, or you got to work hard in order to succeed. And some of them say you got to play this long game and be patient and grind and hustle and all that sort of stuff. It's just bullshit. Like at the end of the day, that is just their puffery, because they are really saying to you that they don't have the skill set to overcome the challenge and figure out how to make it work. The prospecting methods that they were suggesting to me, in the early days of my profession, I would just listen to them and I'd just think, I would rather stick pins in my fucking eyes than do what they've just suggested to me. It was just such fucking garbage that I was listening to that I just could not even think about stomaching the idea of knocking on doors randomly, or even accept the concept of sitting there saying, well, you're going to be speaking to a lot more people that are going to say no before you get a yes, and just accept that. What a load of horse shit. I'd rather get straight to the cellar and go and do something else with my time. And that made a lot of sense. I know it's just a quick example. I know you've heard me talk about this all before. And what I want to talk to you about the next time that we're on here, and I want to leave you with these questions. I implore you to just grab a piece of paper and just have a think about what I'm going to share with you right now. For me, it was the turning point of my career. I went from a salesperson that was doing well, but wasn't that clear on what I wanted, to moving to about 3 times the productivity that I was already doing. And I was in pretty stiff competition. I just went ahead of them in leaps and bounds by just comprehending a few things about myself and about how I then utilized and set up the operational side of me to become a peak performer. So I was doing, and you all heard these numbers before, between 12 and 15 listings per month and 10 sales a month, quite often I had some assistance, but no PA, none of this EBU stuff. And I was doing it on my own. And it all came from me just understanding that which I'm about to share with you right now. I now call this the 4 E's. So what I did is I evaluated myself personally and the way that I performed. I then eliminated certain aspects outside of what most real estate agents would, because I began to understand how I function and how I best functioned inside that space. I then elevated my performance because of that understanding. And then finally, I just felt emancipated. So evaluate, eliminate, elevate, and emancipate. And it all was spawned from me answering these very important 4 questions that I have for you between now and the next session that we do. The first question was this: what inside this business am I required to do that I absolutely love? What do I love? What are the tasks and things that I get involved in that I just love them so much I would do them for nothing? Now, the reason I isolate this one is because I only want this to be fall on ears where people understand it and they don't just make decisions around this, that they've got some value in this area. For me, the thing that I've always loved inside the real estate business is listing properties. I love being the highest fee percentage. I love getting people to understand and sell the concept of marketing. I love marketing per se. I love deals. I love negotiating. I love it when somebody says that they like the property, but they don't want to pay a certain amount. And I love it when a seller says, yeah, we want to sell it, but we're not prepared to sell it for that price. That for me is the perfect space for me to function inside of. So that was the first question. And when I started to understand those things, I just said to myself, well, if I was able to do those things that I loved on a daily basis, not only would it be the perfect career lifestyle, but it would never feel like work to me. So the second question that then I have for you is this one. I started to examine, what are some of the things I'm required to do inside the real estate profession that I do, but I kind of do them under sufferance. You know, everyone wants me to do them. I don't really enjoy them, but I kind of feel like I've got to do them because I've got this thing in my head where I'm saying, what's the words? Nobody does them as well as me. Nobody does them as well as me. And that's why I'm kind of stuck in that space. And when I started to evaluate those, I then realized that they're also blockages I have. Then I moved to the next one. And for me, this was relatively easy. What were some of the tasks that I loathed, I hated, where I genuinely would rather stick pins in my eyes? And prospecting was at the top of the list. Most forms of prospecting were at the top of the list. Coming in a close second was showing buyers property, manning open for inspections for argument's sake, definitely doing any form of back office paperwork and stuff like that. And I'll talk about that. I'm just giving you my example. So just writing down all those things that you see that you just hate doing. And then the fourth question, and this is an important one, no less important than any of them, to be perfectly honest with you, and that was, what do I crave? What do I want to do? What would make this profession perfect for me? So if I was able, when I looked at those 4 questions, and I'll go into this in more detail next week, but if I was able to do more of what I loved, I didn't have to do any of the things that I loathed, and I could start to free myself up from the things that I'm doing under sufferance, would I then be able to do the things that I craved? And the answer was yes. And what this spelt out for me was that I was able to comfortably move from the beginnings of the profession, where in foothold, when I was trying to break into a market, trying to break into the profession, I accepted that I had to put in man hours and do a lot of the things that I didn't like. Then when I started to get some listings and I started to run traction and work off one into the other and build that client base, which so often you've heard me talk about, I got on top of that. And then came this phase where I moved into momentum and I said, how do I have a listings constantly coming in without any work whatsoever? And all of a sudden I was taking loads of time off. I was in total control of it, because over a space of the month, those 12 to 15 listings that I talked about, I could rarely, there'd be maybe 5 or 6 that I could tell you about, but there were often anything up to 8 of those listings. I couldn't even tell you where they came from. They were just coming to me and totally attracted. And this worked. And especially when I had run this evaluation, when I evaluated my performance and I started to eliminate all of the things that I didn't like doing, elevate those things that I did, and I was fully emancipated. Hopefully this has been helpful. I look forward to next week. I do want your feedback. I know that some of you have actually told me the major thing that you want to see from Real Estate Rockstar is all of the rational and the dialogue and all the fancy. We're going to do lots of that. There's going to be lots of these things in place. But I do ask you, as best you can, to move with me through this space here. Number one, get in there, get your mojo back, get a clear understanding of where you want to go, get energized, get that magic charm about you as we move forward inside the real estate space. Again, you can contact me, Mark, M-A-R-K, at realestaterockstar.com.au, or my phone number +61 410 592 165. And I look forward to catching you next week on Real Estate Rocknrolla Online.